The airport terminal buzzed with a hollow energy, a cacophony of rolling suitcases and hurried goodbyes. But for Daniel, the world had gone silent the moment he saw the words on the screen. Flight cancelled. His heart lurched, a cold fist squeezing his chest as he stood frozen at the check-in counter. His boarding pass now a useless scrap in his trembling hand. He'd been abandoned, by his wife Sarah, by his friends, by the life he thought he knew. The realization hit like a slow, cruel wave. They had left him behind, and it wasn't an accident. Daniel had always loved Canada's crisp autumn air. The way the maple leaves burned red against the gray sky. This trip to Vancouver was supposed to be a celebration. A reunion with their college friends Mark and Emily. A chance to reconnect after years of drifting apart. Sarah had been distant lately, her laughter rarer, her touches fleeting, but Daniel chalked it up to the stress of their demanding jobs. He'd hoped this trip would rekindle the warmth they'd shared in their early years, when love felt like a language only they spoke. The first few days were golden. They hiked through Stanley Park, the group's laughter echoing through the towering cedars. Sarah's eyes sparkled when she teased Daniel about his terrible sense of direction, and for a moment, he felt the old her, the one who'd once written him love notes on napkins. Mark and Emily, too, seemed like their old selves, cracking inside jokes from their university days. But there were moments, fleeting and sharp, that pricked at Daniel's instincts. A glance between Sarah and Mark that lingered too long. Emily's forced smile when Daniel suggested a group photo. A hushed conversation that stopped when he entered the room. He brushed it off as paranoia, the residue of his own insecurities. On the last day, the plan was simple. A morning at Granville Island, lunch at a seafood shack, then straight to the airport for their evening flight back to Chicago. Daniel had packed early, his suitcase neatly zipped by the hotel door. Sarah, unusually quiet, had kissed his cheek and said, "I'll meet you at the market. Just need to grab something with them." He'd nodded, ignoring the unease curling in his gut. The market was a blur of colors and scents. Freshly baked bread, the tang of smoked salmon, artisans calling out to passersby. Daniel wandered, checking his phone for Sarah's texts, but none came. By noon he called her. No answer. He tried Emily. Voicemail. Mark's phone went straight to a robotic message. His unease sharpened into dread. He texted the group chat. "Where are you guys?" "I'm at the market." Silence. By 2 p.m., with their flight departure looming, Daniel's worry turned to panic. He rushed back to the hotel, hoping they'd return there. The room was eerily tidy, their suitcases gone. His was still by the door, untouched. A note lay on the bed, scrawled in Sarah's hurried handwriting. "We had to leave early. Sorry. We'll talk when you're back." His breath caught a jagged edge to it. Why would they leave without him? Why cancel his flight? He grabbed his phone, hands shaking, and called the airline. The agent's voice was polite but firm. "Sir, your ticket was canceled this morning by a member of your party. No reason was provided." Daniel's knees buckled, and he sank onto the bed, the note crumpling in his fist. Sarah had done this. His wife of 7 years, the woman he'd built a life with, had deliberately left him stranded. The taxi ride to the airport was a blur, the driver's chatter a distant hum against the storm in Daniel's mind. He replayed every moment of the trip, searching for clues. Had Sarah's distance been more than stress? Had Mark's arm around her at the bonfire been too familiar? Had Emily's avoidance been guilt? The questions gnawed at him, each one a fresh cut to his already bleeding heart. At the airport, he stood at the gate where their flight had departed an hour ago. The waiting area was empty now, save for a janitor sweeping stray napkins. Daniel's chest ached with a grief he couldn't name. He called Sarah again, and this time she answered. "Dan," she said, her voice flat, distant, like she was speaking from another world. "I'm sorry." "Sorry." His voice cracked, raw with hurt. "You canceled my flight, Sarah. You left me here. What the hell is going on?" There was a pause, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. "I needed space," she said finally. "We all did. Things haven't been right for a while." "Space." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You couldn't talk to me? You had to strand me in another country." "It wasn't planned like that," she said, but her words sounded rehearsed, fragile. "Mark and Emily thought it'd be easier this way. We'll talk when you're home, I promise." Easier for who? He shouted, drawing stares from passers-by. You're my wife, Sarah. My wife. His voice broke on the last word, and he hung up before she could respond. Tears burned his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. The next flight to Chicago wasn't until morning, leaving Daniel to wander the terminal like a ghost. He found a quiet corner near a coffee shop, the neon lights casting harsh shadows on his face. His mind spiraled, piecing together the betrayal. Sarah's late nights at work, her sudden interest in weekend trips with friends. The way she'd stopped wearing her wedding ring, claiming it irritated her skin. The signs had been there, but he'd trusted her too much to see them. He thought of Mark, his old roommate, always charming, always a little too close to Sarah. And Emily, who'd once been Daniel's confidant but had grown distant, her loyalty clearly shifting. Had they all planned this? Was this a cruel prank or something deeper, uglier? The possibility that Sarah and Mark were more than friends clawed at him. A betrayal so visceral it stole his breath. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos, stopping at one from their wedding day. Sarah's smile had been radiant, her eyes locked on his like he was her entire world. He'd felt invincible then, certain their love could weather anything. Now that certainty lay shattered, replaced by a hollow ache. Trust, he realized, was a fragile thing, easily broken and impossible to rebuild once it was gone. The flight home was a blur of turbulence and sleeplessness. Daniel stared out the window, the clouds below a mirror to his foggy thoughts. He imagined confronting Sarah, demanding answers, but the words felt inadequate. How do you confront someone who's already left you? Not just physically but emotionally. When he landed in Chicago, the city felt foreign, its skyline cold and unwelcoming. He took a cab to their apartment, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. The key turned in the lock and he stepped inside, expecting to find Sarah waiting. Instead, the apartment was empty, her belongings gone. A single envelope sat on the kitchen counter, his name written in her familiar script. His hand shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter, her words precise and devastating. Daniel, I'm sorry for how this happened. I've been unhappy for a long time, and I didn't know how to tell you. Mark and we've grown close. It's not what you think, not entirely, but I can't pretend anymore. I need to figure out who I am without you. I've moved out. The divorce papers will come soon. Please don't hate me. The letter slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the floor. Divorce. The word was a blade, cutting through the last threads of hope he'd clung to. He sank to the floor, his back against the counter, and let the tears come. They weren't just for Sarah, but for the life he'd lost, the trust he'd given so freely. The man he'd been before this betrayal carved him hollow. Days turned to weeks and Daniel moved through life like a shadow. Friends reached out, but he couldn't face their pity. He saw Sarah once from a distance at a cafe with Mark. Her laughter, once his, now belonged to someone else. The sight burned, but it also sparked something new. A flicker of resolve. He wouldn't let this define him. He started small, reclaiming pieces of himself. He joined a hiking group, finding solace in the rhythm of his steps. He wrote letters to Sarah, not to send but to purge the pain. And slowly he began to forgive, not her but himself, for trusting too much, for loving too deeply. The betrayal had shattered him, but it also revealed his strength. He was more than the husband she'd left behind. As he stood on a cliff overlooking Lake Michigan, the wind sharp against his face, Daniel felt the first stirrings of freedom. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.